all of the hot topics in HR.
Whether it's passive talent or it's active talent.
That's a soft skill that really gets undersold in the hiring process.
How to manage in the virtual environment.
You get a diverse, cultured group of people. It's a win-win for everybody.
More conversion from candidate leads.
What does that look like in this new virtual world?
Welcome, everyone. It is Thursday, noon Eastern time, and you know what that means. It is time for Talent Experience Live. I am your host, Devin Foster, and this, of course, is your weekly look at hot topics in HR, interviews with leaders in the industry, as well as hot new HR tech. And today, we are talking HR tech, but this show always covers everything that you need to know from recruitment to talent acquisition and talent management, and really anything else in between. I appreciate you taking time away from filling out your NCAA brackets and joining me on this Thursday afternoon. But let's start with sharing this out to your network and where everyone is from. I always love to see where people are tuning in from. So definitely hop into the comments section and make your voice heard. If you aren't able to catch the full episode today, or perhaps missed a little bit of previous episodes, you can always check out the blog recap on phenom.com/blogs, or we always re-air the YouTube versions, which are there forever. You can always check them out. I'm always checking out to see how many views we got. And it looks like some people are starting to chime in with where they are from. I see Mary is joining us from Mass. Welcome. Tim from Carolina is joining us. Welcome. And Brandon from New Jersey. Welcome all of you. Today we have a great episode. Welcome James from Dallas. A great episode around AI for Recruiting 101. When it comes to artificial intelligence, we hear a lot of questions here at Phenom and from TA teams all over the world. What are the benefits of AI recruiting? How should I use it in my day-to-day? And what are the best tools available? So today we have two special guests joining us to dive into that. But before we do, I want you to make your voice heard, hop into the chat as Mary and James already have, and we are actually going to start off with an icebreaker question. AI is a term that is used all over really the world today. So my question for you is, what is your favorite user-friendly AI experience? Is it Netflix and how it tells you the next show to watch after you finished binging Bridgerton, or the new Pirates documentary? Is it Waze helping you get from point A to point B faster? Potentially it's Grammarly, which I have been told I need to use more frequently because my spelling is awful. So definitely hop into the chat. Let me know what your favorite really user-friendly AI is outside of work. And while you are doing that, always like and subscribe to Phenom's content. We push out great content on a daily, if not weekly basis. And you can always follow us on LinkedIn and or Facebook. We also have a TXL email. Lost my train of thought, needed AI to help me out. A TXL email that you can reach out if you have any questions that pop into your head after the show. That's txl@phenompeople.com. So definitely hit us up. As I mentioned before, I'm Devin Foster, and today's topic is all around AI and Recruiting 101. Today, I am joined by two experts in this industry and really this topic as a whole. We have Kumar, Director of Product Management at Phenom, and Ilya Goldin, Principal Data Scientist at Phenom. So without any more further hesitation, let's bring them onto the show. Hey, how are you both?
Hey, Devin. Great to be back on the show. And
it's good to have you on the show. I promise I'm going to get that t-shirt to you as soon as possible, friend of the show. Ilya, this is your first time on the show. Welcome. It's tradition around these parts that no one gets away from the icebreaker question. I saw Mary chime into the chat and said Netflix was her favorite type and use case of AI. What would yours be, Ilya?
You know, I was thinking about this when you asked the icebreaker. I think Grammarly is a really neat example, but just to take it down to a more basic level, spell checkers, right? Spell checkers have been around since 1970s, and we don't necessarily think about them as AI, and some of them are maybe not AI, right? If you're just looking up whether some word is in a dictionary or not, that's maybe not AI, but it also shows how the definition of what is sophisticated technology, it really shifts over time. Back when those things were introduced, checking a word that you typed against a dictionary of like 10,000 things automatically in real time, that was crazy. So spell checkers would probably be my go-to example for like an AI that's part of our lives every day.
That's awesome. Well, the one thing that I wish around spell checkers is oftentimes I do a lot of work for our European clients as well as salespeople. And I wish that there was a toggle where you could say, no, this is for a prospect in London. That's why specialized is not spelled with a Z in this instance. So I'm sure that machine learning and artificial intelligence will continue to evolve for that in the future if it doesn't already exist. But another question that we always ask around here is, how did you end up in the HR technology space? I don't think that is anyone grows up and says, you know what, one day I want to talk about machine learning and AI when it comes to applications and personalization on career sites. So Kumar, I'll start with you on this. How did you end up in the HR technology space?
My mom told me that my first word was AI. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I started off in the tech space overall as a software developer, ran solution consulting and architecture design for a while, and ended up in product management. But my background is really varied. I've worked a lot in enterprise security space, which is a whole lot different from HR tech. Had a great opportunity to meet our CEO, heard the Phenoms story and the vision, was truly inspired, and I made the switch to HR tech. And it's been an awesome ride the last 3 years.
I'm sure it has been an awesome ride. I've been here for a few years as well, and I've been through a couple office changes as well as seeing the product continue to grow. So it's always an exciting time, and I know we thank you for all of your hard work on that. Ilya, how about you? Was your first word AI when you were beginning to talk, or how did you fall into this space?
Yeah, that's also a fun question. So. Far as I know, my first word was not AI. I have no idea what my first word was. I used to work in AI in the education space before I came to Phenom, and it was super valuable to me that I was super meaningful to me that I was trying to somehow improve the world with technology. In the education space, there are lots of opportunities to personalize technology. There are lots of opportunities to adapt to the learning needs of any particular individual. It makes it really easy to get out of bed in the morning and say, I'm really trying to make the world better with supporting learners, supporting teachers, that sort of thing. And so when Phenom reached out to me, a cold call on LinkedIn, if you will, at first I was, a little skeptical. But as I started learning about the company, I realized that, education wasn't necessarily the only way to try to make the world better with technology. And HR, again, tackling real human problems, trying to make the world better for people seeking jobs, for companies trying to grow their staff. That was a super valuable thing to try to do. So I jumped in with both feet. I've been here for about 2 years, and I've been enjoying every minute of it.
That's awesome. Oftentimes I associate from my background in HR as they get the bad end of the stick, if you will, sometimes, right? HR is associated with people getting in trouble or, kind of having to be the bad guy on you've used too many vacation days or whatever it may be. But you bring up a fantastic point that it truly is still about people, right? And there's a reason why HR, the H there, stands for humans, and it's the human element of really the entire organization and making sure that you are managing your people properly and fairly at the end of the day. But one hot topic that has been coming up for as long as I've been in the HR space is AI. So in layman's terms, Ilya, could you be able to explain that? What is AI as a whole, and why do we need it in human resources, right? It wasn't too long ago people were filling out handwritten applications. Now everything's moving towards technology that should simplify things, but why is AI so important, and what does it actually mean?
That's a great question. Kumar asked me this question the other day. My answer was that AI is a technology that only works some of the time. And it gets at kind of a basic truth about AI, about spell checkers or Netflix or anything of the sort, right? You're trying to solve some big complicated problem, and you don't even necessarily know ahead of time what the problem is, so you can't pre-program the machine to do it for you, right? If we had to write a rule-based system that said, if you have watched Star Wars, then recommend Harry Potter, right? We would get very bored after 100 movies or so. And new ones are coming out every week, right? So you're never going to have the expertise to create those rules ahead of time. So you have to have, and if if you cover all movies, you're going to have new people coming to watch those movies, right? New customers with new preferences and new tastes. So you have to make a probabilistic guess about circumstances that you've never seen before. That to me is a defining characteristic of problems to which we usefully can try to apply AI. There's lots of data, and it's way too complicated to be able to represent in any kind of small rule-based representation. In HR, there's lots of problems just like that, right? We want to, if you're coming to a career site, we want to recommend jobs to you, but we've never seen you, the individual candidate, before. And by the way, the job that we want to recommend to you maybe just got posted like 2 hours ago. So there's no way to plan ahead for that kind of circumstance. And so we need to think about how to automate something that may work, may fail occasionally. We hope it works more often than it fails, of course. And we hope to improve how it gets better over time. And so that's the typical kind of question that we think about in AI for HR. Recommendation, search, personalization, prediction, forecasting, processing complex documents. Those are the typical kind of problems that we think about in AI for HR.
It's an interesting example that you provided there with the Star Wars and Harry Potter. And immediately what I thought of is, there are technologies out there for food that leverage AI, right? And you think about, just because you have pizza one night does not mean that you need Italian food every single night of the week, right? You want some of that variety, and humans are complex individuals in that sense. So when it comes to talent acquisition and hiring, let's say, for instance, somebody on the marketing team wants to hire another Devin, right? They're very rarely going to find somebody with the exact same experience who's been, in certain roles for the exact period of time. So that educated guessing makes sense, and then applying that not only to a CRM perspective, but also for personalized search and incorporating those artificial intelligence really use cases that we live by now, right? No longer do we, search through an encyclopedia or a dictionary to find out answers to simple questions. We ask Alexa. We type it in Google, and Google guesses what we're going to ask beforehand. But I think it is very well known in talent acquisition. Kumar, my question for you is, how is it leveraged for talent management, people who already exist within an organization that you may have a profile on already?
Absolutely. I think there are tons of use cases for talent management. If you think of the current scenario today, there's so much more emphasis on retaining talent and helping grow employees to their fullest potential. Like Ilya mentioned, recommendation systems are being used to recommend jobs to employees, but the systems have gotten a little bit more sophisticated now. It's not just about looking at who the employee is from a profile perspective and recommending jobs. It's gone a little bit further, looking at data points like performance, looking at data points like industry average tenures, readiness to move, and other external characteristics that can be a part of this recommendation story. If you look at other topics for talent management per se, learning is huge, and we want every employee to upskill themselves and look at achieving greater heights. So how do you use AI to show a learning path for people who want to grow and learn? Or it could just be beyond learning, maybe recommending a gig to an employee to pick up some skills here or there, or even recommending a mentor to connect to help address certain skill gaps. And career pathing is huge, right? So most employees leave the company because they don't see a path forward, and using AI, using the analysis of data and identifying patterns of past career paths that have happened within the enterprise and showcasing that to employees is a huge advantage and a leg up for enterprises today.
So what you're explaining are all great examples, right? Of career pathing, mentoring, segmented search for individuals, personalization on the career site. Me being a true sports fan and a New York Jets fan at that, I'm used to hearing great things and then being let down. So are there any potential negatives to artificial intelligence when it comes to this space? Because everything sounds so great, but realistically, I'm used to getting let down. So I'll start with you, Ilya. What are some potential negatives to AI?
Well, evil robots take over the world. They destroy everything. That's always a potential negative, right? The probability of that negative is extremely low, but I guess the harm from that negative is potentially extremely high, right? So we would try to avoid that kind of circumstance. Okay. The downsides that I worry about the most in HR, of course, are downsides related to not just is some model being inaccurate. Some model will always be inaccurate in some circumstances, but are there systematic patterns to how a model is being inaccurate that are especially somehow harmful or inaccurate for particular demographic groups, for particular clients, customers, organizations, for slices of the world where it's not just some model is sometimes inaccurate, but there are patterns to this that my dog seems to think that this is also a concern. But that's the kind of stuff that I tend to worry about the most.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true, and I am also very concerned about the evil robots as well. War Games with Matthew Broderick from, I believe, the late 80s is one of my favorite movies, so I understand that concept as well as iRobot with Will Smith. But Kumar, I'll ask you the same question. I know we just talked about diversity and inclusion, which is a hot topic, and that is cause for concern, that potentially, I know garbage in, garbage out isn't oftentimes used when it comes to AI, but are there any other really potential pitfalls of leveraging this sort of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to understand what are the capabilities of AI and what are the outcomes of AI, right? And what impact does it have for humans? And as long as we have a good understanding of that, it helps us use AI in the right places and avoid it in wrong places. So if you think of a few key elements, I look at, do we have enough quality data based on which we can deploy AI in certain scenarios? And even beyond that, do we have enough feedback loops that a human can override certain AI decisions? That becomes very important. So if you apply the same concept to a TA perspective, think of matching and scoring candidates. Maybe a recruiter is trying to optimize and really prioritize candidates who get an interview with a hiring manager based on an AI calculated score. You need to think about, are you using the score to make a hiring decision, or is it just a prioritization decision, right? So it's important to think about it that way. Do you have enough past training data that can be leveraged, which is bias-free, that can really be used in a much more efficient way? And is there an override function? Can a recruiter say, in spite of the scoring, I'm going to override that decision and give my feedback? If your answer is no to any of those, then you have to be very careful on how you're going to leverage AI.
That's interesting. The example that comes to mind is if you're torn between two candidates at the end of the day, are you going to rely on the fit score that was provided early on in the process, or are you going to refer back to your conversations and the interactions and the thank you notes that have been sent back and forth? If you're relying a little bit too heavily on those decisions, it could potentially be a pitfall. Now, the other aspect of AI that I think always comes around is machine learning. They're almost described in tandem like Shaq and Kobe or Jordan and Pippen. So my question for you, Ilya, is number one, what is different about the two of them, and why is HR technology literally obsessed with acronyms? We have ATS, we have HCM, we have TXM, we have AI, machine learning. So what are the differences, and do you know any insight behind the fascination with acronyms?
Are you asking if we have too many TLAs?
That's exactly
three-letter acronyms. I mean, we have a few. Mine tend to be 2 letters. There's AI, there's ML, there's DS for data science, but also NLP for natural language processing, and IR for information retrieval, and IE for information extraction. The list goes on, right? Yeah, I don't know why, but actually, if I go back to my psychology roots, why do we have acronyms in general, right? The reason we have acronyms is, and this is a guess, I've never done research on this myself, but there is some research in linguistics on something called common ground. And if you and I are talking about some topic for the first time, we're just 2 people participating in a dialogue, then maybe we're going to use, the full extended name for something, right? Like this notion of the 3-letter acronym, we would spell it out. But by the time we're, chatting about this for the umpteenth time, we TLAs, and you know what I mean, and that I know what you mean, right? We don't have to spell it out every time, and so it's a way of making dialogue more efficient, and it's a way of referring to some topic that is potentially very, very complex in a very shorthand kind of way. So it's an efficiency consideration, and at the same time, it's also a meaning kind of consideration. It's a semantic consideration, right? Because if I say that I'm talking about AI, I'm not talking about ECS, right? Electrical engineering and computer science, right? That's a distinct field with its own conventions and histories and ideas and so forth. So that's why acronyms. Now, what do these things actually mean? AI is kind of the umbrella term. Academic discipline goes back to 1960s, maybe even earlier by some analysis. You think about people writing code in Lisp and trying to build little logic models of the world. And since then, AI has exploded. Machine learning is a particularly useful and prominent subcategory of AI. Machine learning is all about, if I show the system a bunch of examples, can it learn from those examples? Can it learn a rule or a pattern and apply that rule or pattern in a new context, to a new example that it's never seen before? That's machine learning in a nutshell. There's natural language processing, which itself is a huge field with a bunch of different subfields, like natural language processing devoted to dialogue and chatbots, natural language processing devoted to search, natural language processing devoted to taking a document and extracting useful properties out of it, like say skills out of a job description. So beyond those, there's probably dozens of additional subfields of AI. I don't want to bore our audience too much today, but it's a huge field and it's evolving rapidly, right? I did my PhD in 2011. It's been 10 years. In 10 years, the field has changed dramatically. You know what was not a thing 10 years ago? Deep learning. Now deep learning is everywhere, right? TensorFlow is everywhere. So it's very rapidly moving field. I expect that it'll keep growing very rapidly. So there'll be, you know, a few more acronyms to learn one of these days.
Good. I'm sure the one that comes to mind right now, deep learning. You mean DL, of course.
Of course.
But no, it's just something to think about. I think I know my generation was always given a hard time for the LOL, the LMAO, the BRBs, the talk to you laters, right? But it's something that we use to be more efficient, and that's exactly what AI and machine learning are being leveraged for, right? There's simply not enough time in the day to go through 5,000 resumes. There's simply not enough time to schedule 100 interviews, you know, or whatever it may be, especially with smaller teams. So this is all created and really used to make us more efficient at our jobs and keep that human element in the most important use cases. Kumar, I know we talked a little bit at the top about diversity, and there is a concern that AI may create more diversity issues or potentially could solve it. So my question to you is there technology out there that exists that says, hey, if I flip the switch, AI will fix all of my organization's diversity and inclusion and equity issues? Is something like that out there?
Unfortunately, no, but there's an interesting intersection between AI and diversity out there, right? So there are certain people who are trying to solve the problem of using AI and machine learning models to predict certain underrepresented classes and really help bring out some insights to users and customers to solve their diversity directives. But it's also important to understand that it can vary depending on what classification you're trying to solve. So if you're looking at probably trying to predict gender, maybe you have some reasonable outcomes there. But if you're looking at other classes, it can become a really difficult scenario. And especially when there is decision making based on some of those outcomes at stake, we'll have to be really careful on how we use AI. We believe AI may not necessarily solve a diversity problem, but it can help raise a lot of awareness. So if you think of AI, we talk about it almost every week here within Phenom, and we are looking at how AI and personalization can help, let's say, drive candidates to diverse talent communities or drive employees to join diversity groups so that they can source diverse talent for jobs that are not diverse enough, right? Things like that is important. And also there's questions asked when I talk to customers about, hey, can I fine tune your AI outcome to start recommending candidates that are diverse? But the way we look at it is solving this is a two-step process. AI is going to treat everybody equally and score them and rank them in the same way, but is only going to layer on certain insights from a diversity standpoint that organizations can use to, let's say, build a more diverse interview pool, for example, based on what their definition of underrepresented class means.
It's interesting, and I know it's been a hot topic, and it will continue to be a hot topic moving forward. So it's great to hear that won't necessarily fix any of your diversity and inclusions or equity issues, but it can certainly assist in helping rectify them at your organization. One topic that has come up a bunch around really the future state of AI has been succession planning. I've seen a lot around that. We've actually talked about it a couple times on previous episodes. The episode with Tim Sackett, we chatted a little bit about it. Is that something that AI can look into as well and kind of help predict, hey, this individual may be up for a promotion, it's time to backfill this role, or they're potentially looking elsewhere or getting ready to retire? Is that something that AI can be leveraged for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting on how AI can fit into areas like succession planning. If you think of succession planning, it has always been once a year thing. Managers look at all the people who report to them and figure out who their successors could be if there is a flight risk. But the challenge with that is they often miss out on certain key signals, certain key behaviors of employees where they could be a little bit more better prepared. So what AI can do is really analyze some of the engagement patterns of employees, look at industry data and benchmarking, identify potentially flight risks or high-performing employees that can really grow further and you can help retain talent better, or even employees that need help who are not necessarily a flight risk but need some attention. So how do you look at all these behaviors, these signals, and really help a manager build a proper growth plan for the entire team is interesting. So that's where AI can help. And some another topic that is related to succession planning is overall workforce planning, right? So that talks about, okay, what skills do I have in my company? What skills are out there? Where are we going towards? What those gaps are, and can AI really help identify those critical skill gaps, not just based on what we have and what the industry has, but based on behaviors and patterns within the network, within my employee base, and really come up with predictions and recommendations on what future roles to build for. So it's kind of interesting space that we are trying to think about as well.
It's exciting, right, to hear about the future state of organizations and how you can prepare yourself better, with enough time before things kind of go haywire and there is somebody who is a flight risk who's out the door and now you're scrambling. I know when we talked with Tim last week, he was talking about a large restaurant chain and how they were very strict on keeping only 100 managers at this restaurant chain. And then when one of them left, they were constantly, backfilling and trying to refill those positions. It sounds like AI and machine learning can definitely help there. Aside from succession planning and workforce planning, are there any other key areas over the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years where you see AI truly helping? Is it video within HR? Is it mentoring? Where do you see the future going?
Yeah, I think there's tons of opportunities for AI to be a little bit more accurate based on all the learnings and patterns that we see. And there's a lot of scope for automation using AI. Video is interesting, I think, especially when you think about how AI can potentially analyze video from a speech to text perspective. Could be a simple example, identify skills that people are talking about and use that as endorsements and really bubble up candidates who are talking about some of those critical skills. Or even use video outcomes as screening based on some screening questionnaires where candidates really don't have to go and apply and fill out screening questionnaires from a drop down and figure out from there. Maybe I can help there. It also gets interesting once you get into sentiment analysis and facial recognition. It can be a little bit tricky from an outcomes perspective, but we'll see how things go. Mentoring is interesting as well. I think it's kind of bringing together people who have exhibited strong competencies within the company to people who need help with those competencies and bringing them together, even though they are not hierarchically or organizationally aligned, is an interesting use case as well.
That's awesome. Exciting stuff in the future. I really wanted to thank you both for joining today. I always enjoy learning a little bit more about AI, ML, DL, and every other acronym that comes up. But it's certainly not something that's going away. So anyone who's on the show, I appreciate you taking the time to learn more. If you have any more questions, like I said, you can always reach out to us at txl@phenompeople.com. We're happy to answer any questions. And gentlemen, thank you both so much for taking the time and your hard work and helping explain this in layman's terms to someone like me. I wish you both the best, and hopefully we'll be back in the office soon and we can do this in a real live studio.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Sounds great. I'll bring my dog anyway.
Perfect. We'll see you later. Awesome. Well, there you have it. That was Kumar and Ilya chatting about AI and how it can be used in talent acquisition, talent management, DE&I, as well as a little bit on succession planning, mentoring, and workforce planning as well. Before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. We do this every single Thursday, noon Eastern time. Always happy to chat with you on the side if you're interested in joining the show. We do want to showcase a little bit. I teased last week's episode with Tim Sackett, who is an HR and recruiting talent expert. Last week, we talked about movement manners and how managers should reinvent and encourage career growth. This is a clip a little bit about celebrating your employees, so I'll air the clip. And feel free to check out the full episode on YouTube or on phenom.com/blog.
One of my first HR jobs and then became the head of TA was for Applebee's. And I had an area director who worked for me who every time she was in a restaurant, it didn't matter if you were a manager, if you were a cook, if you were a bartender, she would take a picture and then she would put it on Instagram or she would put it on Twitter or even Facebook and just say, but it wasn't just like, oh, hey, what's your name? Okay, yeah, Ted, here, quick, take a picture. We're going to throw it up. It was, she would take time to say, hey, she wanted to hear their story. Like, hey, how long have you worked here? Where are you from? What's your, family situation? Why are you working here? What do you like about it? And then she would share their story. And they were like, I was just a cook making $15 an hour in Applebee's. And now I'm on Facebook and my mom sees it and she sees this, this executive talking about how great I am. And, so it was giving them kind of credence to the work that they're doing. And it doesn't matter if you're a lowly hourly employee or an executive, we all want that to happen. And so I do think we have the ability of leaders to really go out. I tell people all the time, like I used to send notes out to new hires. So when I hired a new recruiter, even somebody that was experienced, but it works really well with entry level, like new grad college, I would send thank you notes to their parents without telling them that I was sending a thank you note for, hey, I want to thank you for Devin. He's come in, he's done all this great work for us, and you guys have raised, and developed a really great kid. Again, like people would come back to me and be like, oh my gosh, like my parents called me and they can't, this is the greatest thing ever.
That episode with Tim was awesome. We covered everything that you need to know from how managers should reinvent and encourage career growth, as well as we snuck a little bit of college basketball in there as well. We made some analogies around college coaches. I know that Tim will be watching his Michigan State Spartans later tonight as they take on, and I will too, now that gambling is legal in the state of Pennsylvania. But anyway, that does it for today's episode of Talent Experience Live. I thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone, for chiming in the comment section. Can't wait to chat next week with everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. Thanks.